Sir, I need proof of citizenship. You're acting nervous.
Nervous? This is my property. Why are you questioning me?
Ownership doesn't exempt you. Where were you born?
I don't need to explain my existence. I live here.
Let's not make this difficult. Refusing to cooperate isn't helping. Show me your documents.
You're making assumptions that are completely wrong.
The Colonial at 427 Willow Creek Drive sat quiet when it happened. Saturday afternoon, 2:17 p.m. The kind of suburban tranquility where lawns were professionally maintained, where driveways held luxury vehicles, where the neighborhood watch signs promised security that everyone assumed applied equally. Lieutenant Holden Cross had just returned from his morning run, his Saturday routine for the past 8 years since buying the house. Still in his athletic wear, navy running shorts, moisture-wicking shirt, his house keys in hand, his federal ID badge visible on the lanyard around his neck, identifying him as H. Cross, Senior Auditor, DHSOIG. He'd just reached his driveway when 3 ICE agents emerged from a white government SUV parked across the street, moving with aggressive purpose toward his property. Their body cameras were rolling, recording what would become the most expensive trespass in the history of federal enforcement. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button because, trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Agent Sterling Archer led the approach, his partners, Agents Moss and Wells, flanking wide like they were corralling a suspect trying to enter a residence illegally. Cross saw them coming up his own driveway, read the tactical spacing, the hands hovering near duty belts, the body language of men who'd already decided he was a problem. His auditor brain, sharpened through 21 years of investigating federal agencies, countless compliance reviews, hundreds of procedural examinations, cataloged it all in the second it took them to reach his property line. Federal agents, immigration and customs enforcement patches visible on their tactical vests, looking at him like he was trespassing instead of a homeowner standing in his own driveway. Looking at the federal ID badge around his neck, and the house keys in his hand, and the suburban home behind him, and deciding that combination couldn't possibly be legitimate. Not for a black man in this neighborhood. He knew where this was going before Archer opened his mouth. He'd audited ICE operations, had written reports about enforcement overreach, had documented systematic failures in their procedures. He'd testified before congressional committees about agents who profiled based on demographics instead of evidence. So he just never imagined he'd experience it himself. Not in his own driveway. Not at the house he'd saved for years to buy. Not when he literally held the federal position that gave him oversight authority over the very agents approaching him. Sir, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're conducting verification operations in this neighborhood. Cross's hands stayed visible, one holding his house keys, the other at his side, his federal ID badge clearly displayed on the lanyard around his neck. 21 years of auditing federal operations had taught him how encounters could escalate, how documentation would be critical, how compliance, even when you were the victim of profiling, could mean survival. Around them, Willow Creek Drive hummed with Saturday afternoon quiet. A neighbor washing his car 2 houses down. His kids playing basketball in a driveway across the street. The kind of peaceful suburban scene where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. And next door, stepping out to check his mailbox, a neighbor named Quinn Rafferty, a software engineer who'd been friendly since Cross moved in, paused with his phone out, some instinct telling him to document what appeared to be an unusual confrontation at his neighbor's driveway. The most expensive trespass in federal enforcement history was about to cost the government $20.4 million. And it hadn't even occurred to Agent Sterling Archer that the man he was about to arrest might actually be the federal auditor who could have them all fired with a single report, might actually be the senior investigator whose job was literally to hold ICE accountable for exactly this kind of constitutional violation. "This is my house," Cross said, his auditor's precision evident despite the absurdity. "I'm Lieutenant Holden Cross, Metro PD. I'm also a federal auditor with DHS Office of Inspector General. My credentials are visible on my badge. I'm standing in my own driveway holding my house keys." Archer's expression didn't soften. "You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood. Show me proof of citizenship. Now." Cross looked at the keys in his hand, at the federal ID badge around his neck, at the house behind him where he'd lived for 8 years. Then he looked at the 3 agents who'd decided none of that mattered because they'd seen a black man in athletic wear and assumed he was suspicious. I audit your department. I investigate federal agents for procedural violations. And you're about to give me the most documented case of constitutional overreach in your agency's history. Willow Creek Drive on a Saturday afternoon embodied suburban American achievement. Manicured lawns maintained by professional services, driveways hosting luxury vehicles, colonial and craftsman homes valued at $600,000 and up. The kind of neighborhood where families moved for good schools and safe streets, where HOA regulations ensured aesthetic consistency, where Saturday meant youth soccer games and backyard barbecues, and the quiet hum of riding mowers. Saturday afternoon at 2:17 p.m. was peak weekend tranquility. Neighbors washing cars in driveways, children riding bikes on sidewalks, a few residents walking dogs along tree-lined streets. The kind of scene that real estate agents photographed for marketing materials, are representing the dream of home ownership and community. Lieutenant Holden Cross's Colonial at 427 Willow Creek Drive fit perfectly into this landscape. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, updated kitchen, professionally landscaped yard. He'd bought it 8 years ago after years of saving and searching, the culmination of 2 decades of work as both a Metro PD lieutenant and a federal auditor. The house represented achievement, stability, the reward for serving his community and his country in dual capacities. He'd just finished his Saturday morning routine, 10-mile run through the neighborhood, shower, quick breakfast. Now he was heading out for afternoon errands, dressed casually in navy running shorts and a moisture-wicking athletic shirt, his house keys in hand, his federal ID badge still on the lanyard around his neck from checking his work email that morning. The badge identified him clearly. Holden Cross, Senior Auditor, Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General. The position he'd held for 12 years, investigating federal agencies for compliance violations, procedural failures, constitutional overreach. His job was literally holding federal law enforcement accountable. He was 20 feet from his garage when he noticed the white Chevrolet Suburban pull onto Willow Creek Drive and park directly across the street from his driveway. Government plates, tinted windows, the tactical configuration that meant federal agents. His auditor brain activated immediately. ICE vehicle, 3 occupants visible, positioning that blocked his driveway access. Not random, deliberate. And they'd been waiting for him. 3 men emerged in tactical vests, ice patches visible, moving across the street toward his property with aggressive purpose. Not approaching multiple houses, not canvassing the neighborhood. Moving directly toward him in his own driveway with the kind of tactical spacing that suggested they'd identified a target. Cross's keys stayed in his hand, his federal ID visible on his chest. His smart home security system was recording everything. Doorbell camera, driveway cameras, perimeter cameras, part of the security infrastructure he'd installed after auditing reports about residential break-ins. 2 houses down, his neighbor Marcus was washing his Audi, watching with growing interest. Across the street, the Henderson kids had paused their basketball game. Next door, Quinn Rafferty was checking his mailbox. His software engineer's curiosity clearly piqued by federal agents approaching his neighbor. The most expensive trespass in federal enforcement history was about to unfold in Cross's own driveway. And the irony wasn't lost on him. A federal auditor whose job was investigating agency misconduct was about to experience it firsthand, on his own property, in the neighborhood where he'd lived peacefully for 8 years. Agent Sterling Archer led the approach, his partners spreading wide as they crossed onto Cross's property without permission, without warrant, treating a federal auditor's home like it was a site requiring tactical enforcement. Cross's hands stayed visible despite every instinct that wanted to reach for his phone and call his supervisor, his attorney, someone who could verify his identity and end this before it escalated. The 21 years as an auditor had taught him how federal operations could go wrong, how documentation would be critical, how maintaining professional composure under pressure could mean the difference between a resolved misunderstanding and a constitutional crisis. But his auditor brain was already working, cataloging procedural violations in real time. Agent Archer held center position, approaching across Cross's driveway, while his partners spread into tactical formation. Moss moved left toward the garage, cutting off that direction. Wells shifted right toward the front walkway, blocking access to the house. A perfect triangle that controlled Cross's property and eliminated his escape routes. It was high-risk apprehension tactics, the same formation Cross had reviewed in dozens of audit reports. The positioning used when approaching armed suspects or executing felony warrants. when the tactical situation required maximum control because you assumed the subject was dangerous. They were using it on a federal auditor in his own driveway holding house keys. Violation 1. Trespass on private residential property without consent, warrant, or exigent circumstances. Violation 2. Tactical deployment disproportionate to apparent threat level. Homeowner in athletic wear holding house keys. Violation 3. Failure to identify legal basis for approach before initiating contact. Sir, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to see identification and documentation. Archer's voice carried bureaucratic authority that expected immediate compliance. Cross kept his tone professional, measured, to the same voice he used when questioning agency directors about policy failures. Officers, I'm Lieutenant Holden Cross, Metro Police Department. I'm also a senior federal auditor with DHS Office of Inspector General. This is my residence. My credentials are visible on my badge. He gestured to the ID hanging on his chest. Clear photo, federal seal, position clearly printed. Archer's expression didn't soften. We're conducting verification operations. We need to see documentation proving legal residence and citizenship. My federal ID proves I'm a DHS employee. My house keys prove I'm a resident. I've lived here for 8 years. Is there a specific reason you're approaching me on my own property? Violation 4. Failure to articulate reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts. The tactical spacing tightened. Moss took a half-step closer from the garage side. Wells adjusted his angle from the walkway. They were herding him on his own property, controlling his movement like he was a suspect instead of a homeowner holding keys to the door 15 feet behind him. Around them, Willow Creek Drive was slowing. Marcus had stopped washing his car, watching. The Henderson kids had abandoned their basketball game. Quinn Rafferty was clearly recording now with his phone, his expression suggesting he recognized something wrong. Cross looked at each agent, making sure their body cameras captured his professional demeanor, his visible federal credentials, his house keys. I'm going to need you to explain the legal basis for approaching me on private property. I'm a federal employee. I'm a homeowner. I'm standing in my own driveway. What reasonable suspicion justifies this contact? You fit the description of individuals we're seeking in this area. What description? A black man in athletic wear in his own driveway? Silence, because that was exactly the description. His auditor brain added it to the growing list of violations. Violation 5. Demographic profiling without individualized suspicion. My federal credentials are around my neck, Cross said, with the precision of someone who'd spent 21 years documenting evidence. Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General. Senior Auditor. My photo, my position, my federal employment clearly visible. I can also provide my Metro PD credentials from inside my house. Archer barely glanced at the badge hanging on Cross's chest. That could be fake. Elaborate forgeries are common. The statement hung in the suburban air, calling a DHSOIG badge fake while conducting ICE operations, the institutional blindness stunning in its absurdity. This badge has embedded security features, holographic seals, and RFID chips that connect to federal databases. It's not a forgery, it's official federal identification that grants me access to classified systems. Call the DHSOIG office. They'll verify I'm Senior Auditor Cross, currently off duty at my residence. We'll verify after we establish your legal status. Cross reached slowly for his wallet, despite Archer's earlier implicit warning, movements deliberate. My driver's license shows this address. My Metro PD credentials show my law enforcement status. Together, they prove I'm a resident officer living at this location. He held out his license. Archer took it, examining it like he was looking for signs of forgery instead of simply reading the printed information. Driver's license. Address? 427 Willow Creek Drive. Holden Cross. Current and valid. This doesn't prove citizenship. This doesn't prove you're authorized to be here. It's a state-issued driver's license with my residential address. I'm Lieutenant Holden Cross. I was born at City General Hospital 52 years ago. I'm a natural-born United States citizen who owns this property. Wells, positioned near the front walkway, spoke up. Sir, if you're really a federal auditor, you'll have documentation beyond badges that could be purchased online. Birth certificate, passport, naturalization papers. I don't carry my birth certificate when going for a run, Agent Wells. And I don't need naturalization papers because I was born in this city, in this state, in this country. I've served as a federal employee for 12 years and a police officer for 21 years. Cross pulled out his federal building access card, his Metro PD union card, his DHSOIG business card. These are all official credentials. Call the numbers on any of these cards. My office, my precinct, my supervisor. Any of them will verify I'm Senior Auditor Cross, currently at my residence. Archer pocketed the license without examining the other credentials. We'll verify everything after we process you. Process me for what? I'm standing in my own driveway holding my house keys. I've shown you federal identification. I've offered verification. There's no legal basis for processing me anywhere. Moss stepped closer from the garage side. So your presence in this neighborhood is suspicious. Your claims of federal employment seem inconsistent with the demographic profile. Violation. 6. Explicit racial profiling, stating that his presence is inconsistent with neighborhood demographics. Quinn Rafferty's voice carried from next door. That's Holden. He's lived here for 8 years. He's my neighbor. What are you doing? Sir, step back. I won't step back. This is our neighborhood. That's his house. Why are you harassing a homeowner in his own driveway? But Archer was reaching for handcuffs now, and Cross knew, from his auditor brain, from his law enforcement experience, from his lived reality as a black man in America, that his federal credentials, his house keys, his years of service, and none of it would protect him from agents who'd decided he didn't belong in this neighborhood, regardless of the evidence. If this story is hitting close to home, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what unfolds next. Agent Archer, Cross's voice carried with the authority developed through 21 years of interrogating federal officials and testifying before oversight committees. I'm going to explain this once for your body cameras, my security system, and these witnesses. The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures, including on their own property. You're conducting enforcement operations on my private residential land without a warrant, without my consent, and without reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts. Archer stepped closer, on attempting intimidation on Cross's own driveway. Sir, final warning. Furthermore, Cross continued, his auditor's precision cutting through the attempted intimidation. Under United States versus Martinez Fuerte and subsequent precedent, even immigration checkpoints require reasonable suspicion for individual stops. You've provided no facts justifying this contact beyond observing me in my own driveway. That's not reasonable suspicion. That's demographic profiling, which violates both constitutional law and your own agency's policies. The driveway had become an impromptu hearing, with Cross delivering what amounted to a compliance audit of his own detention. Neighbors had gathered now, Marcus from 2 houses down, the Henderson family, the others emerging from homes to witness federal agents confronting someone they all recognized as their quiet, professional neighbor. Quinn Rafferty had positioned himself for optimal recording angle, his phone capturing everything. I'm invoking my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable seizure on my own property. I do not consent to this contact. I do not consent to any detention. I do not consent to trespass on my land. I am clearly articulating for these cameras, yours, mine, and civilian witnesses, that I'm a United States citizen, a federal auditor, a police lieutenant, a homeowner, and I'm being illegally detained in my own driveway. Wells moved in from the walkway side, handcuffs visible. You're being detained for verification of legal status. Cooperation is required. I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm refusing illegal detention on private property. Every federal agent in this country knows the difference. You're conflating them because you've profiled a black man in this neighborhood and decided he must be suspicious despite federal credentials and house keys. Moss grabbed Cross's left arm. Cross didn't fight. Violence in a residential neighborhood could endanger others, could escalate to deadly force. But he didn't help either. His body went completely limp, forcing the agent to support his full weight. For the record, Cross's voice remained steady, his auditor's calm merging with professional documentation. It's 2:23 p.m. on Saturday, August 19th. I'm being physically detained at 427 Willow Creek Drive, my residence of 8 years. I have not threatened anyone. I have not attempted to flee. I have not committed any crime. And I identified myself as a federal auditor and police lieutenant. I showed credentials. I offered verification through my office. I'm being arrested because 3 ICE agents decided a black man in this neighborhood with federal credentials must be lying. Voices erupted from the gathered neighbors. "This is wrong! That's Holden's house. He's a federal employee. Someone call a supervisor." Quinn's voice carried clear authority. "I'm recording this. He's a DHS auditor. His badge is visible. This is his property. You're trespassing and conducting unlawful detention." Cross looked directly at Archer's body camera. "My smart home security system is recording from 6 angles. My doorbell camera, my driveway cameras, my perimeter system. All of it cloud uploaded in real time. Every procedural violation preserved as evidence for the lawsuit that will cost your agency everything." The handcuffs closed around Cross's wrists, still holding his house keys, the metal cutting into his palm. The symbolism wasn't lost on his auditor brain. A homeowner literally clutching the keys to his own door, being shackled on his own property by federal agents. "I'm not resisting," Cross announced with professional clarity, his voice carrying to every neighbor, every camera, every witness. "I'm submitting to unlawful detention. Every action from this point forward is being documented for federal litigation." Moss grabbed his right arm, Wells his left. They tried to walk him toward their SUV parked across the street, but Cross let his body go completely limp. Dead weight. See, all 185 pounds of federal auditor became a burden they had to drag off his own property. "Move! Walk!" "No, I'm being unlawfully arrested on my own land. I will not assist in this constitutional violation." "You want to detain a federal auditor and homeowner in his own driveway? You're going to drag me in front of all these witnesses and cameras." It was passive resistance, deliberate and documented. The same technique he'd reviewed in civil rights audit reports and never imagined deploying in his running shorts on his own driveway. They dragged him across his property, past the landscaping he'd paid to maintain, past the garage where his personal vehicle sat, past the front door he couldn't reach despite holding the keys, his running shoes scraped against concrete, his athletic shirt riding up, his federal ID badge swinging loose on its lanyard. "I'm being dragged across my own property at 2:25 p.m., Cross narrated, with auditor precision, documenting every detail. "My shoulder is being wrenched. The handcuffs are cutting off circulation. This is excessive force applied to a non-resistant homeowner who presented federal credentials." Marcus was on his phone now, clearly calling someone. Maybe police, maybe Cross's work, maybe an attorney. The Henderson kids were crying, confused why their nice neighbor was being arrested. Other residents had phones out, recording from multiple angles. Quinn Rafferty was following the agents with his phone. "This is unlawful. I'm documenting everything. This man is a federal employee at his own residence. You're conducting illegal detention." "Sir, step back or you'll be arrested." "For what?" "Now witnessing your constitutional violations? I'm on my own property recording a crime being committed against my neighbor." They reached the street, dragging Cross past the professionally maintained lawns, past the neighborhood watch signs promising safety, toward the white SUV that had brought this violation to Willow Creek Drive. Archer opened the rear door, prisoner transport configuration, steel mesh partition, vinyl seats designed to be hosed clean. "Watch your head," he said without caring, shoving Cross inside. Cross couldn't catch himself with hands cuffed and still holding his house keys, hit the seat hard, his head striking the partition with force that opened a cut above his eyebrow. Blood. Warm and sticky, mixing with sweat from his morning run. More evidence of excessive force applied to a non-resistant federal official. On he sat up awkwardly, hands still bound, keys still gripped in his palm, and looked through the tinted windows at his house, the home he'd saved years to buy, standing 15 feet away, but unreachable. At his neighbors witnessing this violation. At Quinn still recording every moment. "It's 2:27 p.m. I'm Lieutenant Holden Cross, Metro PD Badge 6183, Senior Federal Auditor, DHSOIG. I've been unlawfully arrested at my own residence, assaulted during detention, and am being transported against my will. I want every badge number, every name, every second of footage, yours, mine, and civilian, preserved for the $20 million lawsuit I will file." The door slammed, cutting him off from his home, his neighborhood, his life. But not from accountability. Never from accountability. Because Cross had spent 21 years auditing federal failures, and he knew exactly how to document violations that would end careers. The federal detention facility holding cell was 10 feet by 10 feet of institutional design, calculated to strip identity and manufacture despair. Concrete walls painted institutional beige, metal bench bolted to the floor, toilet in the corner with no privacy. Fluorescent lights humming with bureaucratic indifference, the air thick with industrial cleaner and fear. This was the machinery Cross had audited countless times: detention centers, processing facilities, the infrastructure where constitutional rights disappeared into paperwork. He'd written reports about these cells, had documented failures in detention procedures, had testified about systematic violations. Now he was experiencing it from inside. Yes, they'd stripped him of his athletic shirt during intake. Moisture-wicking fabric, now evidence in some locker. His house keys confiscated, his federal ID badge removed. His phone showing 47 missed calls, probably his office, his precinct, Quinn calling to confirm what he'd witnessed. Personal effects. The intake officer, Rodriguez, nameplate visible, gestured to a bin. Keys, badge, phone, watch, wallet. Cross stood in his running shorts, stripped of everything that identified him as a federal auditor, a police lieutenant, a homeowner. I'm a DHSOIG senior auditor. I'm entitled to notification of my office. I'm being illegally detained at my own residence. After processing, I'm a federal employee. I have oversight authority over your agency. But you're creating an interagency incident by detaining me without verification. Rodriguez's expression didn't flicker. Just following procedures. The same bureaucratic compliance Cross had seen in dozens of failed agencies. Cell 4. The door buzzed electronically. The space smelled like institutional failure. Cross stepped inside, heard the lock engage. He sat on the cold bench and let his auditor brain take over. Not panic. Analysis. 21 years of auditing federal detention had taught him exactly how this system worked. The processing delays, the verification procedures that could stretch for hours, the bureaucratic machinery designed to isolate and intimidate. He'd reviewed hundreds of detention reports, had documented systematic failures, had written recommendations about unconstitutional practices. Now he was case study material. Its mental documentation began immediately. Violation 7. Detention without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. Violation 8. Failure to verify credentials before transport. Violation 9. Denial of phone call to federal supervisor. Violation 10. Excessive detention time without charging. He thought about his house, unsecured now, his front door unlocked because he'd been arrested before entering. His security system recording an empty driveway. His neighbors probably gathered outside, confused and concerned. The clock through the observation window read 5:47 p.m., over 3 hours since his driveway. His Saturday afternoon errands abandoned. His peaceful weekend shattered by agents who'd seen a black man in his own neighborhood and decided he needed verification. But Cross wasn't despairing. He was documenting. And every procedural failure, every constitutional violation, every moment that would become evidence in the audit report that would destroy careers, and the lawsuit that would cost $20.4 million. 4 hours, he calculated. They'd keep him 4 hours before someone at DHSOIG noticed their senior auditor was missing and started making calls that would end this catastrophe. He settled in to wait, to document, and to plan the accountability that would follow. Morris Sterling had supervised ICE field operations for 14 years, long enough to recognize career-ending disasters. The call from DHS Office of Inspector General at 6:34 p.m., 4 hours after the Willow Creek detention, triggered every professional alarm. Supervisor Sterling, this is Deputy Inspector General Morrison. Where is Senior Auditor Holden Cross? He missed a scheduled call. To his emergency contacts report, he was arrested at his residence, and we have footage of your agents detaining him in his own driveway. Sterling's world collapsed. Senior Auditor? DHSOIG? Your agents arrested the federal auditor who oversees your agency at his home, while he was holding his house keys, with his credentials visible. We have his smart home security footage. It's catastrophic. She pulled the detention log with shaking hands. Willow Creek Drive verification operation, authorized by Agent Archer, subject detained for suspicious presence in neighborhood. 1 detention, unidentified male, claimed federal employment and property ownership, refused to provide documentation beyond suspected fraudulent credentials. They'd arrested a DHSOIG senior auditor at his own house. on the federal official whose job was investigating their agency for exactly this kind of violation. She ran to intake. Rodriguez looked up, reading disaster in her expression. The subject from Willow Creek. Where is he? Cell 4. Claims he's a federal auditor. We've been waiting for verification. Show me his intake photo. The screen displayed a man in athletic wear, disheveled, bloodied, expression of controlled fury, and unmistakably Senior Auditor Holden Cross, whose face Sterling recognized from oversight meetings. She grabbed the evidence items: federal ID badge, house keys to 427 Willow Creek, phone with 73 missed calls from DHS-OIG, Metro PD, Quinn-Neighbor. She ran to cell 4. Through the window, Cross sat with perfect posture despite 4 hours of detention, mentally documenting. She opened the door. Cross looked up. Oh, unsurprised. Assessing. Senior Auditor Cross, I'm Supervisor Maura Sterling. There's been a catastrophic error. I sincerely apologize. Error? Cross stood slowly. Your agents trespassed on my property, ignored my federal credentials, arrested me in my own driveway, and detained me for 4 hours. That's not an error. That's systematic constitutional violation. We'll begin an immediate review. You'll preserve evidence. Every moment documented. Every agent's name. Every frame of body camera and home security footage. My smart home system uploaded everything to the cloud. 6 camera angles. All of it evidence. Sterling felt her career ending. We'll cooperate fully. You'll cooperate because I'm demanding it as the senior auditor who oversees your agency. I'm filing a federal lawsuit. I'm opening a formal OIG investigation. And I'm writing an audit report that will expose every systematic failure that allowed this. And I'm ensuring congressional oversight committees know a federal auditor was arrested at his own home. Cross walked past her, head high. My belongings, transportation to my residence where my house is still unsecured, and every log file, every policy document, every training record, all of it preserved for the investigation that will dismantle your field office. We can resolve this through professional channels. Professional? You arrested me in my running shorts holding my house keys. This resolves in federal court with a jury awarding damages that will make national news. He collected his items, checked his phone, 73 missed calls, his federal ID badge, his house keys, everything they'd taken from a homeowner in his own driveway. Oh, and Supervisor Sterling, I've spent 21 years auditing agencies for failures. I know every procedural violation you committed, and I'm going to document them with the same thoroughness I've used to end careers before yours. The trial began 18 months later in federal district court. Attorney Ivy Beaumont, a powerhouse civil rights litigator, stood before the jury and delivered an opening statement that combined legal precision with moral clarity. Lieutenant Holden Cross went for a run. He's a 21-year police veteran. He's a senior federal auditor whose job is investigating agencies for misconduct. And 3 ICE agents decided he looked suspicious. Not because he'd committed a crime, but because they saw a black man in athletic wear in his own driveway and assumed he was trespassing, despite federal credentials around his neck, despite house keys in his hand, despite living there for 8 years. The monitors showed body camera footage from Archer's perspective. Timestamp, 2:17:33 p.m. Watch. You'll see Auditor Cross in his driveway. Federal ID badge visible. House keys in hand. Professional. Authorized. Now watch the agent's approach with tactical formation, treating a homeowner like a high-value suspect. The footage showed the confrontation, the credential dismissal, the escalation, Cross identifying himself repeatedly, offering verification through his federal office, citing constitutional law, while Archer called his DHS-OIG badge fake. 7 jurors took notes. Others watched with visible anger. And the home security footage came next. 6 angles from Cross's smart home system, crystal clear, high definition. The full encounter from driveway cameras, doorbell camera, perimeter system. Cross being dragged off his own property while holding his house keys. Blood from excessive force. Quinn Rafferty recording, neighbors protesting. 5 jurors were visibly outraged. Then Beaumont played audio from Archer's body camera after the arrest. He doesn't belong in that neighborhood. Probably lying about everything. We did the right thing, checking him. The jury heard explicit bias, an agent admitting he didn't believe Cross belonged in his own neighborhood, despite credentials, despite keys, despite evidence. The defense tried damage control, protocols, suspected fraudulent credentials, brief detention, only 4 hours, and Cross's release. On then Beaumont called Supervisor Sterling to the stand. Supervisor, your agents testified they followed protocols. What protocol allows trespassing on private property to arrest a homeowner holding house keys? The agents believed his federal ID badge was around his neck. Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General, clearly visible on camera. What made them believe it was fake? They felt the credentials seemed inconsistent. Inconsistent with what? A black man owning a house in that neighborhood? That's not a protocol, that's racial profiling. Sterling had no answer. The jury watched her fail to justify the unjustifiable. The truth, Supervisor, is your agents saw a black man and decided he was suspicious. They arrested a federal auditor in his own driveway. See, then they detained him for 4 hours to avoid admitting their mistake. Deliberation. 16 hours. Verdict. Unanimous. Constitutional violations. False arrest. Excessive force. Trespass. Racial profiling. Damages. $20.4 million. The courtroom erupted. Cross sat quietly, thinking about the system he'd audited for decades, now forced to account for its own failures. The settlement arrived 19 weeks later. $20.4 million, the largest residential profiling judgment in the circuit's history. After legal fees, Cross had resources to transform federal oversight. He returned to DHSOIG immediately, promoted to Deputy Inspector General within a year. His arrest had become a case study taught at every federal law enforcement academy. Agents Archer, Moss, and Wells were terminated before discipline hearings. See Supervisor Sterling forced into early retirement. The entire field office restructured under new leadership. The Department of Homeland Security announced sweeping reforms: no residential operations without warrants, mandatory credential verification before detention, supervisor approval for all neighborhood operations, body camera preservation requirements, quarterly civil rights audits. The Cross case became the definitive example. But Cross knew policy changes weren't enough. He created the Federal Accountability Project with $17 million of his settlement. The nonprofit provided free legal representation to citizens targeted by federal profiling. It trained communities on constitutional protections against law enforcement overreach. It investigated systematic failures and brought lawsuits relentlessly. Our first year, 1,247 clients represented, 892 cases won, $31.7 million in additional settlements. 34 attorneys grew to 72, 12 offices to 38, national impact. Lieutenant Holden Cross stayed at DHSOIG, now overseeing the very reforms his case had triggered. His Willow Creek house remained his home, though neighbors now called him the one who changed everything. 10 years later, Deputy Inspector General Cross had transformed federal oversight. His arrest had generated Supreme Court precedent on residential profiling. Willow Creek Drive had a memorial marker. On this property, Auditor Holden Cross defended constitutional rights in his own driveway. His courage changed federal law enforcement. Progress wasn't one verdict, as it was making it possible for the next black homeowner to stand in their own driveway without agents deciding they looked too suspicious to belong. That day hadn't fully arrived, but because of what happened in that driveway, because of the $20.4 million judgment, because of the project, and thousands of cases it supported, that day was closer. Deputy Inspector General Holden Cross had paid the price for systemic bias. He was making sure the system paid everything. One lawsuit, one protected citizen, one defended home at a time. His office displayed his house keys from that day, still in evidence bags, never used because he was arrested before entering. Below them, a quote he'd written: "They took my freedom for 4 hours. I took their immunity forever." Justice, audited and delivered.